Ever since 2002, with the Mary Kay Letourneau case and the Boston Archdiocese scandal, the media has been more interested in reporting about sex abuse of students in schools, changing societal awareness about what before had thought to be the unthinkable. The way people and the public look at sex abuse in schools has changed demonstrably since then, impacting schools in unexpected ways. Child sex abuse is a larger societal problem, though. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, the jury verdicts can be staggering. The sex abuse problem is extensive and not isolated. Literally thousands of such claims have been brought in the U.S. since 2002. If you think the Catholic Church has a problem, the physical sexual abuse of students in schools is likely more than 100 times the abuse by priests. In this special network TV show of Justice in America, America's K-12 school sex abuse scandals, our investigative team sits down with Morgan Stewart and Saul Wolf at the Manley Stewart Finaldi law firm, who have successfully represented victims of abuse in schools in the highest profile cases. Among them, in 2014, the LA Unified School District agreed to pay a record of $139 million to settle legal claims with 69 parents and 81 students at Miramont Elementary School who accused teacher Mark Berndt of molestation and the school for failing to address complaints of misconduct against Berndt for years. Berndt was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In May of 2016, the Los Angeles Unified School District agreed to pay $88 million to settle sex abuse cases involving 30 children molested by George De La Torre Jr., elementary school teacher Robert Pimentel, and Telfair Avenue elementary teacher Paul Chappelle III. In August 2016, the Redlands Unified School District paid out $6 million to a former Citrus Valley High School student whose teacher, Laura Whitehurst, bore his child. During the past decade, more than 25 victims of childhood sexual abuse have taken RUSD to court in cases that have involved 10 past and present RUSD employees. Morgan Stewart has represented nearly all these victims. In 2018, the Torrance Unified School District agreed to a $31 million settlement with 25 current and former students molested by wrestling coach Thomas Joseph Snyder. Snyder was sentenced in October 2016 to 69 years to life in prison. In 2022, 10 elementary school students who were sexually assaulted by former technology aide Fernando Figueroa received a $13.7 million settlement from the Riverside Unified School District to settle numerous lawsuits. The children ranged in age from 7 to 11 at the time of their abuse. Figueroa was sent to prison in December 2019 for 20 years to life. In 2022, victims of Sun Valley High School wrestling coach Terry Gillard, convicted of molesting 9 children, received a $52 million settlement in a lawsuit that alleged the Los Angeles Unified School District knew of prior sexual misconduct and did nothing about it. In October 2019, Gillard was sentenced to 71 years in prison for sexually assaulting 14 young students. Morgan, Saul, and their firm have earned reputations as unyielding trial lawyers who repeatedly represent individuals and families against big companies and the Goliaths of the world and repeatedly win. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Orange County, California. It is my great pleasure to introduce Morgan Stewart and Saul Wolf to the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Morgan, tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What do you guys specialize in?
We're probably 95% sexual abuse, mostly focused on children, although some crossover to adults, all civil litigation, plaintiff work, pursuing entities such as school districts, churches, hospital institutions, Olympic organizations. That is pretty much the niche of our practice.
Right, and today we are here talking about a big crisis in America, which is the sexual abuse of children in grades kindergarten through the 12th grade, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have handled a lot of cases over the last 20 plus years, correct? Tell our audience a little bit about some of these cases that come to your mind. We're in Southern California. One of them that comes to my mind is the LA Unified School District. I think there was $139 million. How did that case come to light?
That case came to light because parents came forward and were protesting Mark Berndt, who was the perpetrator, currently behind bars in that case. But what we discovered through our investigation was a significant history going back 20 plus years of his abuse of minors and his inappropriate conduct. I think started in the late 80s, where he was exposing his genitals to minor kids on a field trip. And as you traced it through, you saw a significant history of knowledge by administrators and free passes to let him stay with minors.
And exactly what kind of evidence showed that?
Oh, there were tons of documentations.
Between them and Mark?
Yeah, with reprimand records, corrective measures, all of which concluded that he should remain in a classroom.
Right, and I'm surprised, reprimand letters, like, this was a bad thing for you to do, don't do it again, but you can keep your job.
Yes, exactly.
Unbelievable.
I mean, if you're a parent and you know this is going on and you learn that this is going on, it's appalling.
A lot of the abuse cases that I've seen you guys covered deal with coaches oftentimes, right? He was a teacher, wasn't he?
He was a teacher.
And they would go on field trips. What was it?
Elementary school, and unfortunately, and I think we talked about this before, essentially disenfranchised, lower income kids, primarily Spanish-speaking households, kids who wouldn't necessarily speak up, or families who wouldn't necessarily speak up.
So when the kids did go to their parents and said, hey, the teacher did this, that, whatever, they went and complained to the school.
Yeah.
And how long did it take for the school to take any kind of action?
Oh, it was an ongoing years. It happened over the course of years before they took it seriously enough to address it. And the way that ultimately now that I'm recalling it came out was he took photos to a developer and the developer made a mandated report. Because he had photos of kids with bugs on them. He had photos of kids blindfolded. He had photos of kids eating cookies with his semen on them.
How old were these children?
10, 11, 12. I mean, I think we had kids all the way down to 7 and 8 and slightly older, but that was, I mean, the ages he taught were right in the elementary school, I think 4th, 5th, and 6th grades.
You know, Saul, let's talk about this term that he used, mandated reporter. Who does it apply to, and what does it mean?
Well, California law defines mandated reporter to include lots of things. And in our area and what we're talking about in the school district world, it's anyone who has access to kids.
Could be the janitor.
Anyone who has access, from administration who's sitting in their office down to, as you just mentioned, the janitors. Anyone who has access to children, who has exposure to children. And unfortunately, what we see all too often is that the people who are obligated to report either don't know that they are or don't understand what their obligations are.
But are they also afraid that if they report against a fellow employee that they could be fired?
Absolutely.
I'm sure somebody has given testimony before where say, I didn't come forward because I was told I'd lose my job.
Well, there's certainly that. There's also testimony that people don't come forward and report when they know they have to because they just don't believe the kids. It's unbelievable how often we hear that, where they know they've been reports by parents and or children, and they just don't do anything because this can't be true about my fellow colleague, even though we know in the years that we've done this that it takes so much for a child to have the bravery to come forward and say something that every child needs to be believed regardless of what these employees think.
I'm a parent, you're a parent, you too. I can't imagine any kid coming forward and fabricating such an outlandish lie, let's say, that would cause someone to have a lot of trouble, because they'd be worried that they'd get in trouble, right?
I mean, what I just mentioned is exactly the case. The bravery and courage of our clients and families that we represent, of the ones who actually step forward, is mind-blowing, and it's one of the reasons, in my opinion, that our work is so gratifying, to help these clients and these families to go through what they did and what they've gone through. But to answer your question, I haven't encountered a situation where a child has said something about their own abuse or what they've seen that hasn't been the case.
In the clergy sex abuse cases, they have an organization called SNAP, where people can basically help each other in the aftermath of what they've gone through. What about kids? Is there something for them too?
Not in. There are organizations, Child USA or SNAP, Survivors Network of those abused by priests, that do reach into to minors, but there's nothing that necessarily consolidates victims, minor victims, in that.
Right. You also had another case in the LA Unified School District, George Dillatore, an elementary school teacher, another teacher. What kind of crazy things was he doing?
That teacher was notorious for touching students over the clothes. He'd pull kids aside to reach under their clothes. He'd have them sit on his lap and fondle them. A similar situation in Miramonte. Young, primarily Spanish-speaking kids who wouldn't necessarily report. He was protected by the principal over many, many years. I mean, for 10 plus years, she ultimately lost her credentials as a result of his behavior and their knowledge. And we have ongoing cases involving Dillatore.
Was she tried criminally as an accomplice?
No, it was contemplated, and unfortunately she should have been, in my view. Absolutely, unequivocally, she knew things and knew that he was a risk to kids and left him in the school site.
Right. In both these two examples in the LA Unified School District, you mentioned Hispanic kids. Why do you think that Hispanic kids are afraid to tell their parents?
I don't know that they're afraid to tell their parents so much as there's a view, particularly in the Hispanic community, that you send your kid to school, that's a safe space. And there's a language barrier that we see in many cases. We don't necessarily just see it in LAUSD, but we see it in school districts like Riverside or San Jose, where there's a large non-native population that they have a general distrust of going to law enforcement. They and that's something that's built up. So they don't necessarily have a fear of going to their parents. The fear is going to law enforcement or upsetting the school district, and that concern goes across all those borders of, we can't say anything because we don't feel like we belong in this community, and it attracts predators. It unequivocally, in 20 years of experience, what I've seen is that sort of environment attracts predators.
They go after the vulnerable kids.
Go after the vulnerable kids that won't report.
To piggyback on that, what I've seen in those types of cases as well is that a lot of the kids won't say anything because they've been raised that teacher, I mean, the word in Spanish for teacher is maestro. It's master almost, right? So you can't speak up against your teacher. That is just completely taboo. So these children have this utmost respect for that authority. At least they were raised to believe that their teacher, whatever they're doing, can do no wrong. So there's that divide there that a lot of time prevents them or stops them from coming forward. That's why what I said earlier about the bravery to actually say something takes a lot, especially for the kids from these communities.
Talk to us about the statute of limitations. I remember in the state of California, for example, clergy sex abuse cases, they stopped the statute of limitations to allow people to come forward. When you're talking about a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old child, do you have cases where they were molested 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and the statute of limitations does not prevent you from suing?
Yeah, we had a significant amount of cases that existed during a time period where California was in the process of changing the law, particularly because there was complicated what's called government claim statutes, where you had a limitation on what time period you could make those. The legislature in California has been really progressive in adopting changes to those rules to allow sexual abuse victims, to the point where now the law exists that it's up to age 40. Didn't exist like that
In this state.
in this state only.
Other states are different.
Yeah, every state is pretty much different in how they approach statute of limitations.
I was looking at some of your cases, and one of the school districts that pops out a lot is the Redlands Unified School District. Seem to be a lot of cases there. Why is that?
You had a permissive administration that allowed it to happen. You had higher pay and the knowledge that if you look at Redlands as a microcosm, it's basically the jewel of the Inland Empire in California. It's the school district where everybody gravitates to. It's got higher pay, it's got nicer facilities, but it also had the underlying knowledge of an administration that allowed perpetrators to operate freely. If you look at one school in that district, it had probably a dozen perpetrators in the course of a 10-year period. The principal that started that school, a woman named Marilyn Kimple, she just had her credentials revoked last August. She's in her 80s, but nonetheless, the state administration took action against her for failing to rectify one of the earliest perpetrators there. And that runs across not only the spectrum of the entire district, but you have an administrator that's currently on leave for an investigation who was found during an investigation involving Laura Whitehurst to be destroying documents. Testimony came out from Redlands Police Department. They searched the search warrant because the district was not cooperating and found her in the course of destroying documents related to that teacher. That's just two examples of, short examples of perpetrators in that district. It is probably, I would rank it up there amongst the worst districts in terms of student safety in the world.
Yeah. Now, the person that was destroying the documents, anything happened to them criminal?
No. Again, not a thing happened because
That's a failure of the system.
this is a hugely important fact. The district attorney in the county of San Bernardino when this was happening was a gentleman by the name of Michael Ramos. He was the former president of the school board for Redlands, declined to prosecute her. I mean, that's if you cannot connect those dots and say, well, you know, you've got a district attorney who's deciding not to prosecute a administrator that's destroying documents in a childhood sexual abuse investigation, whose wife is the secretary of the superintendent of the school district, and you were the former president of the school district, then we've got a huge problem across the board. This is exactly why school districts do not get cleaned up.
Why this continues to persist? Because you still have cases there, don't you?
I think 8 cases ongoing currently.
The case that I was specifically, I was looking at Laura Whitehurst, who bore his child, had sex with an underage person.
5 victims that we know of had sex with the last one.
No criminal prosecution.
Yeah, she was prosecuted. She got a slap on the wrist, essentially, and was out in, I think, 60 days, 90 days, something like that.
Let me ask you, you mentioned this is the district in the Inland Empire that everybody gravitates toward because they get paid a lot of money, or more than other places. What about the students' test scores? Does that reflect that they have high test scores there?
You know, I believe Redlands is one of the best scoring districts in the area. I mean, and that's one of the reasons, like Morgan said, that a lot of students gravitate, or a lot of families gravitate towards that area. They have a good reputation educationally. Right. However, as we've seen over and over and over again, the dark side of that district is much more worrisome than people realize. And now it's finally, you know, over the course of 10 years, I think Morgan's been litigating against Redlands Unified School District, that the Department of Justice has done a full-blown investigation into that district, which is, in our mind, a big step towards trying to clean it up because it's long overdue.
Okay, now, when you're speaking about the dark side, insurance companies are not stupid. When they see a lot of these cases happening, they ultimately have to pay for some of these cases, don't they? So have they written into their policies exclusion clauses which will protect them so they don't have to lay out the money?
Yeah, so in the early 90s, the school districts, and we're going back before sexual abuse, the school districts realized they couldn't get traditional insurance because of the volume of claims and the risk to claim. So they went to what's called a JPA system, by and large, majority of them, joint powers associations, which is essentially risk pooling. So it's not traditional insurance in the sense it's a contract-based system.
So in other words, if the Redlands Unified School District is ended up getting a lot of verdicts against them or settlements, the San Diego school district has to pay for that too.
Yeah, within bounds that they're choosing which JPA they're in. So, for example, Redlands gets hit, San Bernardino City Unified might need to kick in money, or Colton, surrounding school districts.
And how do they feel about that?
They're not happy about it. Redlands is one of the.
What are they doing about it?
They're sucking it up because they don't have any real choice. What they should be doing is pushing corrective measures amongst school districts that are notoriously bad. Redlands got a higher risk rating because of Whitehurst, Kirkland, Lopez, all those perpetrators who resulted in large settlements and risks to the district, caused Redlands' risk profile to go up substantially, which means they're getting charged more in the JPA. But what they're missing from the equation is all these school districts need to get together and figure out, if you've got a problem, it's my problem also, and we're gonna fix this problem. They're so busy in the method of burying and hiding the sexual abuses in the district. You look at Colton, for example. Colton's a great example. They're not understanding that the root of the problem is where they need to aim it at. They're just placing big Band-Aids on it.
Why isn't there a independent organization that reviews a lot of the teachers, the school systems that are not connected to like Redlands Unified or LAUSD, right? That says, look, we've been, a separate organization. Why isn't some regulatory agency set up like that? I mean, it should be, right?
I mean, it should be. You've got obviously the state government, which I think has tried to keep up with these things. But if you start an investigation against a teacher or a school district, it takes 2 or 3 years. You know how many victims are abused in 2 or 3 years? They're never going to fix the problem on an investigation that takes 2 or 3 years. Redlands took 3+ years to reach a conclusion that they needed corrective measures, which I could have told them from day one they needed corrective measures. I've offered to meet, as an aside, I've offered to sit down with the superintendents and superintendent of Redlands and say, this is what I see as your problems, and they refuse to meet with me. If you don't meet with the person who is suing you repeatedly or who's offering to meet with you, what does that say about your district?
What does it say?
It says you would rather adopt what is the status quo, continue to get sued, continue to fail children and put them at risk, than to ever meet with the person who could tell you what is going on in your district and why it's a problem.
Is there, in a lot of professions, when you get a license to get a teacher credential, right? There's no checkup annually on any of the conduct or behavior of these teachers on a regular basis, is there?
There's ongoing criminal, if someone gets picked up for a crime and actually convicted, then there's a ding that shows up on their record, and then the CTC, the Commission on Teaching Credentialing, gets wind of that and it makes its way to the district. However, along the same lines, once a teacher's tenured, especially, the amount of supervision that is provided to that teacher from the local agency, the school district, in our experience, is almost nil. And so, these teachers have free reign, and I'm not even talking about teachers. I mean, even coaches, and you mentioned that earlier. Yeah. In my experience, coaches, teachers' assistants, those who don't have to go through the credentialing process, are the bulk of our claims that we see, because it's the path of least resistance for these individuals who want access to kids to get that access. All they need to do, really, in some instances, is have a high school diploma, and a school district gives them access to kids and provides zero supervision.
More in the area of coaching or sports, do you find these sexual predators as opposed to just regular, everyday, average teachers?
Absolutely. It's alarming.
And the students probably don't want to say anything because they want to remain on the team.
Yeah, you take another LAUSD case, Polytechnic High School. It's another case. Gillard was the coach. He was a wrestling coach, and essentially he formed what could best be called a prostitution club amongst his students. He would require the students to sleep together in front of him. He would sexually abuse female students.
In front of him?
In front of him. He would drive them around while they had sex, and he would push them to have sex in front of him.
Crazy.
Oh, it's insane. It's literally insane. But each one of those kids, Pacoima school-based school, each one of them, highly Spanish-speaking Latino community, the only way they viewed their way out was because they were part of a Class A all-star wrestling team, and if they got kicked off or they lost his coaching, they might not get out of that community. And he knew it. He would tell them, I can get you a scholarship in college, but you got to go along with my program. You got to be part of my program. I'll get you a scholarship. I'll write recommendation letters, but this is how you get forward in my program. You have sex with each other, and you have sex in front of me. And he had parties.
School district was this?
It's LAUSD.
Really?
Yeah.
What happened to that guy?
He's in prison 50+ years. He was 50 something when he was sentenced, so he's been in about 6, 7 years.
Okay, in the beginning of these cases, you mentioned, Hispanic kids afraid to come forward. How do you get them to talk?
We get them to trust us, and I think that's the most important, and that's the biggest thing from
How do you do that?
to know them, understand what they've gone through, sympathize, and make them know that they're not alone in this process.
Yeah, and now that you've been doing this for 20 plus years, they see a record of success, right? Do any of these kids that were on, let's say, some of these teams, do they end up anyway going on to universities and also playing there? Or has that halted their career by coming forward?
Yeah, Saul can speak to. I think a great example is swimming in Hosieray.
I was just about to say that the line that Terry Giller would give his kids in the wrestling context of, do what I say and I'll get you into college. A guy named Bahram Hosieray, who was a water polo coach in Orange County at various schools and various clubs, would say the same thing to his water polo players. And he coached female water polo, told these little girls, high school age, you do what I say in practice, and I know all the coaches around, I know all the college coaches around, I'll get you where you need to go. And he would have them do things to him in terms of being under the water and grabbing at his body, and he would grab at their bodies underneath their swimsuits, on top of their swimsuits, and make it seem like this is what was necessary for these girls to not only get ahead in high school, but move on to college. I want to answer your question about how we get these survivors to trust us. I think for a lot of them, in my experience, no one's ever told them, I'm sorry for what happened to you.
That seems to do it, huh?
I think it goes a long way for them to realize that we, as their attorneys, are not just their attorneys. We understand that this is a process that they're trying to wade through, right? And so if just making that statement to them, which we mean wholeheartedly because that's why we do what we do, is really important for them to hear, because especially the entities that let this happen, they never apologize, almost never apologize, and that's such a big step.
But getting back to my other question, in essence, they're whistleblowers.
Yeah.
What about, have you seen any of them go on and have success in college and professional sports?
We've definitely seen those move on to college and continue to compete. Mm-hmm. I can't speak to professional sports, but in the Olympic realm, they're professionals in my mind. Those brave women have had tremendous success, but I think what gets confounded in some respect is that success in a sport does not equate to mental health, having good mental health. And I think, I don't want to speak, I don't know Simone Biles personally. John and Morgan dealt with her more, but I think someone like her speaks to that you can be successful in a sport but still struggle mentally. And so these kids who go on to succeed in whatever sports they were in, that doesn't necessarily mean they're okay and they've forgotten about what happened.
Right. That's why I was asking you if there's an organization like SNAP where they can find other people and talk with them. That would seem to be some sort of comfort level for them. These cases take a long time. 5, 6, 10 years, correct?
Depending on the size and the amount of the case, yes.
I noticed that there are a lot of settlements, meaning they didn't go to trial, for the most part. Where do you have to get the enemy? What line do you have to get them on where they're saying, this is not going to be good if we go to trial?
And that's the vast majority of our cases. Is the realization that there's such evidence that they don't want to go to trial. And somebody much smarter than me told me once upon a time that the hard trial dates settle cases from a plaintiff's perspective, because the vast majority of defendants do not want to go to trial. They don't mind working the case, and they don't mind working the case for years. But as soon as it's set for trial, that's when things get real, and that's when things get settled.
Yeah, and that's where the opposing counsel often tries to extend the date of the trial, right? Again and again.
And Saul will tell you my line about not continuing trials.
Never agree to a trial continuance. No, and I think the reason for extending that out, unfortunately, and whether defense counsel or their clients know this or not, or realize this or not, is that it puts an added toll on these survivors. of constantly waiting for their day of justice. And, you know, whether they're intending to do that to make it harder on them or just waiting to see if someone folds and says, okay, I want to be done. It's just really disappointing that they don't value what these people have gone through and rather would like to see them fold.
We've seen a horrific number of clients, not just our clients, but clients across the board pass away while waiting for resolution in the clergy cases. I mean, since the statute opened up, I think there were around 1,500 identified victims in those cases, and there's been something like 25 to 35 deaths.
Some self-inflicted, correct?
Some self-inflicted, yes, unfortunately.
Well, I've noticed, because I've interviewed a lot of people who are victims like this, that often they turn to alcohol or drug.
It's a massive percentage.
When you are contacted, and I would assume, how often are you contacted by people who say that they're victims of schools?
Daily.
What is your process to bring them in? Do you talk to them on the phone? Do you have them come in? What's the story? And oftentimes, if they're young, their parents are going to accompany with them too, right? What is your process from that point in time, so as our audience is listening to that, they know what's going to happen?
We let them dictate. The last thing I want to do is know that their power has been taken away from them, and then take away their power by dictating what they wanted, how I want to do things. If they want me to talk on the phone, I'm more than happy to talk on the phone. If they want me to drive to their house and sit down with them, absolutely. If they want to come in the office, then perfectly fine. I don't want to create barriers to having them tell their story. So they should tell it wherever they're most comfortable telling it. And that's if you've got a kid, regardless of the age, who's been abused by somebody who they trusted once upon a time, which is the vast majority of these, the last thing you want to do is say, I'm a guy in authority, and I'm going to tell you what to do. You want to give them that power, and that's really what we try to do across the board. Is we are experts in litigation, but we're not necessarily experts in knowing everything that they want out of the process and how it unfolds. So we strive to make sure that they're giving us direction to understand what they need, not only monetarily, but from the litigation process.
What do you hear when you brought up what do they want out of the process? What do you hear the most common response to be?
Holding the perpetrator and the institutions accountable and responsible.
Do you recommend to everybody who calls, ask them, have you made a police report?
Absolutely. We want to know if they've, even if their statute is barred by, we want to know, because it makes them feel like they've done something. Again, it's taking back this power that's been taken away from them for so long, giving them the opportunity. And oftentimes, they're going to be frustrated by that process. I have so many clients who are frustrated that they went to the police and nothing happened, or they went to the police and the police declined to prosecute. Unfortunately, when we have a prime example of De La Torre, I mean, the police declined to prosecute him, and as a result, he stayed in the school environment. School knew, by the way, that he had been accused of sexually abusing a family member. Orange County DA declined to prosecute, and that and the school knew that he was a risk. School had multiple reports. Same principal knew, and yet they didn't. They left him in the school environment, knowing he was a risk, knowing he had been accused at that point, I think 5 times of sexually abusing kids, and didn't do anything to him.
What are the other teachers who are good teachers, good people? What do they think of? They know very well who's been accused of whatever. What do they think of their colleagues that are still out there doing whatever they're doing.
As with any organization, there are bad apples that sort of spoil the bunch, and that's unfortunate. You see it in police cases, you see it in clergy cases. There are good people, very good people in almost any entity, schools, churches, sports organizations. I mean, there are good people that work hard. Both Saul and I have coached our kids and other kids in sports. There are good people and unfortunately you get that reputation where there's a bad teacher or a bad coach or a bad priest, and it sort of taints the entire organization. And I think that it's unfortunate that that's happening to those good people and that distrust.
Anything else you want to say to the audience? Like, for example, if you have a case, if you have something, what should they do? First thing
I would tell them is, if you're willing to talk to someone and are at the point of talking to someone from a mental health standpoint, getting therapy and be able to talk through that is a really big step. And once they have the courage to talk to anyone about it, we are fortunate in our firm to not only have lawyers who are trauma informed, but we also have people on staff who answer a lot of the phone calls for us, who are not only trauma informed but have worked directly with survivors for years in the law enforcement realm. So if picking up the phone is something that they are able to do, whether it's a mental health provider or just making a phone call just to ask questions, that's what I would encourage. But those two things are difficult. It's not an easy task, but that's what I would encourage.
Well, I want to thank both of you for the work you do, for being on the show, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
It's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.